Hello, and welcome to yet another video of a raid walkthrough. And this time around, I'm gonna be getting a video out early since we're having Wakamo Hovercraft or WakaBoat, as I like to call it for short, coming up next week. And since I already had my previous year recorded, so I figured I might as well get this video out early so people can have early info on the raid and have some time to prepare for stuff accordingly if you do end up learning anything from this. Now before I do move on, if you do want to just see my clear without any commentary or explanation, I already have that on my channel. I'll leave that on the description as well. For this video, I'm going to be explaining students I chose for what reason and go through my clear and point out wherever I failed. Do also point out different things where you might fail, even if you have a different team composition than what I went for. First, I'm going to go through my main clear that doesn't have any fails. And after that clear is explained and you have a bit of knowledge on how a regular clear looks like, then after that, I will switch to pointing out some of my failure points and also bring up any points that you might want to take care of so you don't have a hard time trying to clear out this raid. Another disclaimer that I do want to put out is that this raid does have two phases, and it's mostly the phase one that is difficult, and that is where you might have a lot of failure points. For phase two, the mechanics are very simple, and if you're doing it extreme or any difficulty below that, you just basically don't have to worry about any mechanics beside the one debuff that this boss has. And if you're doing it on Insane and Torment Plus, there is one thing that changes in your team composition, but in any case, it's phase one that I'm likely going to spend the most time on, and that is where a lot of people will have a hard time. So hopefully this video, once you go through all of it, it will help you understand the raid a bit. Mechanically, again, compared to other raids, it's not that difficult, but there are still places where you might fail on certain mechanics and you might just not know certain intricacies of this raid. Specific to phase one, there are still a couple of mechanics that you do need to take care of. So without further ado, I'm just gonna play my original clear and pause a bit if I want to explain anything. Yeah, starting out, I'm gonna explain my team composition. Now, some of these students, they don't have much to explain. So starting with Mika, as usual, there isn't really much to explain with why Mika is here. And before I explain Hifumi and Fubuki, I'm gonna explain Eimi as well. Eimi exists here mainly because she's this tank that can survive on her own. She doesn't need any assistance to survive. Now, why did I choose Eimi? I went with Eimi because A, she has red armor. Wakamo on Insane and above does yellow damage. And the other reason why I went with Eimi, you can see another thing that Eimi gets, which is important. Like without this, you might not want to use Eimi and go for another option, is a Bond Gear 2. Now, what a Bond Gear Tier 2 specifically does is that it gives her a bit of self heal on her basic skill usage. So what this basically means is that every 15 seconds she recovers HP based on her healing stat, which is good, and that is the reason why I say she's self-sufficient, is because she can basically self-heal, solo heal, and you don't have to worry about survivability. Now, if you don't have Eimi, Tsukuyo, right? So Tsukuyo is technically the best option you can go for here. Now, I don't have Tsukuyo, hence why I went with Eimi. Now, if you don't have either of those, from this video, hopefully get a bit of knowledge and figure out which tank would be the best to put in. Now, why Tsukuyo is technically the best for this raid? A, because she works at 3-star. Even for insane difficulty, she works at 3-star. Once you breach Torment difficulty, you should have enough game knowledge to know that 3-star Tsukuyo can work at Torment, but it's definitely way harder to keep her alive on Torment compared to every difficulty below that. Now, the main thing is that with Tsukuyo, you never use her X skill basically for phase one. So that's just one X skill that you never have to worry about using. With Eimi, like I'll show you my clear, but with Eimi, there are a couple of times where I do have to use Eimi's X. But with Tsukuyo, you never use her X. Now, even though her X says that she heals for 30 seconds, why you never need to use her X? Because of her sub skill. Now, why does this matter? This matters because Wakamo on this specific raid, whenever she attacks, she applies crowd control, which I will show you as I walk through my raid. But basically, this means that more Wakamo attacks Tsukuyo, Tsukuyo just heals up because of that damage. So that's the reason why Tsukuyo is technically the best tank you can get here. That's the Eimi slot explained. Now, besides Eimi, the important student here for this team that I went for, again, there are alternatives to everything, is Hifumi. Why Hifumi? Basically, Hifumi applies crowd control, and on top of that, with phase 1 in Wakamo, especially on Insane and above, you do want 2 people to tank your shots. Now, why do you want that as well? Now, this wouldn't matter if you're playing on extreme difficulty. This is very specific, talking about insane difficulty. This is the main reason why you want 2 tanks, because each attack, as it says, each attack will bounce to the nearest enemy, dealing the same damage. Now, that matters because whatever damage your main tank is taking, and whatever ally, so it could be a summon or it could be just a student themselves, will also take the same amount of damage. Now, if you don't have a second tank, Mika can be a tank, but now if you're gonna have Mika as your secondary tank with Eimi or Tsukuyo being your main tank, you will need to bring some sort of healing for your Mika. Because even though everyone knows that Mika does have a lot of tanking, unlike Tsukuyo or Eimi, Mika doesn't have any way to heal herself. So just keep that in mind if you're taking Mika as your secondary tank on Insane and above. You'll need to bring a dedicated healer to make sure at least your Mika doesn't die. So going back to why Hifumi is being used here, even though she's technically not a tank, he has a summon. So basically, Hifumi here can give me a summon which can act as a secondary or a primary tank. Now, on top of that, that summon inflicts taunt, which is necessary for Wakamo phase 1, because you need to apply CC to Wakamo, and that mechanic you can't really ignore because she has 3 CC bars that you can fill. Now, once you fill the first CC bar, her attack will be increased by 25%. So the more you fill her CC bar, the more damage she does. Now, on top of that, what the CC bar filling will do is it will also make Wakamo take more damage. So you can't really ignore this CC mechanic unless you're brute forcing like hardcore or very hard difficulty with the Mika. So that's why Hifumi exists, because she can fulfill both the roles of applying CC, and on top of that, she can summon it. Now, after that, Fubuki. Fubuki exists as the filler CC application, you could say. Her CC application isn't anything to note of here, but her CC application is free. Look at her basic skill, which is the only source where she applies CC from. Now, I'm pretty sure like a lot of people might not have Fubuki because she's technically an event welfare. Now, that's fine because Hifumi can technically solo a CC application. So if you don't have a Fubuki, you can honestly put anyone in here. It doesn't matter. Like, for example, let's say you don't have NY.Fuuka, so you can bring Himari plus another buffer in your special slot, and you can switch out Fubuki for a Ui, for example. Or again, the slot Fubuki takes is flexible. Fubuki isn't mandatory, but if you do have her, she makes your life very comfortable. Now, as for investment, I'll note down my investment, of course, in the description, and like in my main tier, you can also see what my investments are. I went with as little investment as I could, and this did take me a bit of trial and error. So, of course, if you do have the time to trial and error, feel free to trial and error and see how much minimum investment you can take on Hifumi and Fubuki. So anyways, that's my explanation of the teams that I chose. Now, also another thing regarding Fubuki specifically here, you'll see that she has yellow armor. So that would mean that she's very susceptible to dying to Wakamo. But in phase 1, again, if you have already seen videos about it, or as you'll see further ahead, you'll see that the slot Fubuki takes up is basically safe from any damage in phase 1, because in phase 1 only Wakamo is attacking, and if you're fighting Wakamo on Insane and above, she only targets two students at a time. There are some X skills where she can do an AoE or a penetrative AoE attack in a straight line where it can reach your backline students, but if you position your front line accordingly, again, your backline student, namely the Fubuki slot or anyone in her slot, should be safe. Some of these are replaceable. For example, if you don't have Hifumi invested, or if you just don't have a Hifumi because she is technically a 3-star student, that either you would need to farm for, or and Fubuki, like I said, she's an event welfare, so there is a possibility that you don't even have Fubuki. So if you do want to bring a student that can apply CC, there's a free student called Kayoko. You can bring in Kayoko. She can apply CC from her basic skill, which basic skill is RNG though, but she can also apply CC on her X skill. And if you're bringing Kayoko, you can bring in a healer, so your Mika can be the second tank. So now I'm gonna start my run, and if I have to pause and point out anything, I'll point that out. Now, first of all, I'm gonna summon Hifumi. Now, let me just pause it here and go back a bit and explain why. You can see that currently Eimi is being targeted by Wakamo's X skill. And like I explained earlier on Insane and above, Wakamo technically damages 2 students at a time whenever she uses her. So that's why I open with a Hifumi Peroro summon. Now, regarding Hifumi Peroro in phase 1, basically if you're using Peroro and Hifumi, you do have to make sure that you're placing your Peroro summon as close to either Wakamo as you can, because then Wakamo will use Peroro as the main target and Eimi will be your secondary target, or you place it as close as you can to your tank that's being targeted. So that's why I chose to place Peroro as close to Eimi as I could, because whenever Wakamo attacks her main target, the ricochet goes to the second closest target. So if Peroro's summon was placed a bit too far away from Eimi, Mika would have taken the ricochet, and that would have been unideal. Now this positioning thing, it's hard to explain exactly. I also figured it out after a lot of trial and error. So if you're playing with the Hifumi comp, you might have to figure it out on your own and see how your team rotates around the continuous Peroro summons and how your tank displaces themselves. That's what I mainly wanted to point out with this. Now if I continue, you'll notice that it's the Peroro summon that took the damage from after Eimi being the main target. Me using Mika. Now one thing you'll notice here is after I tossed on Mika with NY.Fuuka, why did I not use Himari outright? The reason for that is since my Himari is not UE40, so I didn't have that extra 1.8 or 9 seconds, I think she provides. Somewhere around that, I might be getting it wrong. But basically, Himari's buff lasts second longer. Now, the reason why I didn't use Himari earlier and why I used her right before Mika's X has the main explosive damage is because A, that allows me to give up that initial damage Mika's X does, and that's not Himari buff, but the main explosion she does, which is part where she does her damage from her X skill, is Himari buff. Now if I proceed with this, now this is where it matters. Matters having a UE40 Himari, because I'm using a 5 cost X skill to rotate back to Mika. Now if I was using, let's say, a 3x cost skill, I could have had Himari buff on Mika earlier, and I could have had both Mika X's be completely Himari buff. But with my specific situation and investment, I had to delay my Himari buffs on Mika when she uses her first X. So you'll notice this, and I did want to explain that. So this is something that you might have to play around with as well, in case you don't have a UE40 Himari, and also in case you're using Hifumi. Now you might be using Kayoko as well. Now Kayoko has a 6 cost X skill, so if you're using Kayoko, this is also another one thing that you might want to take care of. Continue this here. Now you'll see that Eimi is the main tank and Peroro is taking the ricochet damage. That means my Mika doesn't take much damage. Anyways, yep, I'm rotating to Eimi's X skill. Now here you'll see, wait, let me rewind this as well. Another important thing that was unique to my case. Now here, one thing you'll notice is that Eimi repositioned. Like I mentioned earlier, you might have to take care about where you summon Peroro, and if you do summon it in different locations, how your main tank moves around that. And You have to adjust your summons, your Peroro mainly, and summon it so it's as close between Eimi and Wakamo. Now, another thing you'll notice is that currently Peroro is being targeted. So you can see this circle in the center. That's the main target that Wakamo chose. And you'll also notice that it already has very low HP. So now if I continue here, now you'll notice it's gone. Okay, so you can see I don't have a Peroro on the field right now, but Wakamo already logged on to Peroro-sama. Once Wakamo locks on a target with her X skill, she does not actively change that target in the middle of her X skill animation. So even if I did not resummon Peroro-sama, as you can see, I don't have a Peroro-sama up right now, and technically she's targeting a Peroro that was already dead. This 9270 you're seeing, this damage is going to Peroro, but that Peroro doesn't exist. So this is one thing that I ended up realizing for my specific scenario and my specific run, that I can use Peroro as a main tank as well, and if I time it correctly enough, Wakamo is going to end up shooting air, which is good for me because that damage is not going to my team, and the ricochet that is going off of Peroro-sama is hitting Eimi instead of Mika. Now if I continue here, you can see I still don't have a Peroro, and all that damage that is supposed to go to the existing Peroro-sama is not going anywhere. I continue this again, the mechanics and the rotations don't change a lot. This is a fairly simple raid. Continuing on, again you can see Peroro-sama being the main target that Wakamo chose, and Eimi being closest to Peroro took all the ricochets. One more thing I do want to bring up. This I did not bring up earlier. You see these flower petals at the top, right? So whenever Wakamo uses her X skill, she applies 2 petals of this on her main tank. So basically, whenever she uses her X skill, she applies 2 petals to who? 2 petals to the target that's being targeted by her circle, that where she chooses her primary target. Whenever she damages that primary target with her X skill, she applies 2 stacks of these petals. Now, what do these petals mean? These petals mean that once it reaches 5 petals, so every X skill applies to, and once it reaches 5 petals, whichever student has the 5 petals is dead. Now, another thing, as I continue on, here you can see my Eimi has those 2 petals. If I again pull up Wakamo's skill, again, so here you can see where I was mentioning that you can fill up her CC bar 3 times. Now, one thing that it says, after becoming groggy, which basically for Wakamo means after you fill up her 1 CC bar, which is on the top right of her health bar. Once you fill up that bar, it removes all stack of Wakamo imprint. So if I continue this a bit, here you can see me summoning Peroro-sama, applied a bit of CC, and that bar got filled. So as soon as that bar got filled, it will remove any imprint stacks that were there on anyone. Now, those imprint stacks will of course mainly be on your main tank, but if there was another student that had that, those imprint stacks will disappear as soon as you fill the CC bar. That's why CC for phase 1 is a mechanic that you can't really ignore. Even if you ignore it, and even if you don't need that damage buff that you get, the existence of those imprint means that as soon as a student takes 5 petals, which means 3x skills, on the 3rd time they get targeted, there is no saving them. Now let me continue this and go through rest of the run. I'll skip this a bit since I already showed that off. As usual, I'm gonna rotate between Mika, Wakamo, Peroro, and Himari. Oh, sorry, Mika, Peroro, Himari. N.Y.Fuuka, and I'm gonna use Eimi skill because it heals her and also it gives me a rotation. Now here you can see this is like just another variation of her X skill. This shotgun attack has an AoE. Now going back to the positioning and your tanks moving around, you have to make sure that whoever is being targeted here is off to the side, because this AoE that you'll see, this penetrates through your students. So basically, if there was anyone standing behind Eimi, they will also take damage from this. Anyways, so I'll continue from here. So right now I don't have to worry about that damage basically. Now I'm gonna keep continuing and going on. Now you can see Wakamo started running away. Now this is not a phase change. The trigger for her running away is based on simply the timer. So as soon as the raid timer reaches 2 minutes, she will start running away. While she runs away, you can see these red circles that are near Fubuki and Hifumi and Mika. Now these are purely visual. There is no reason to worry about them. Even if your students are off screen, they will not take damage. This is purely a visual thing, so just don't worry about it. Wakamo is running away, so of course we have to chase her down because phase 1 is not over yet. I'm gonna again do the usual thing where I'm gonna summon Peroro-sama as soon as I can, so that Mika does not become the secondary target of her X skill. Now on top of that, as you can see before she started running, so let me show you. So she started running at 156 and she stopped running around 143. So basically it takes her 12, 13, 14, 15 amount of seconds to run. And while she's running away, basically you can't do anything. You just have to go through this animation. Make sure you're not capped on cost before she starts running away. But that means all the 13, 14 seconds that she takes to run, all of that cost is going to waste. As usual, I'm going to summon Peroro-sama as soon as I can. And also cancel her X skill, which is also good for me. As usual, I'm going to do the double Mika rotation. Now here I'm basically at the end of phase 1 and I only need one more Mika X skill, so it honestly does not matter where I place Peroro-sama here. Now because I had an easier time with the phase 1, I did have 1 minute left, so that 1 minute is basically just gonna be using as many Mika X skills as I can use here. I'm gonna skip this part. I'm gonna fast forward this a bit because it doesn't really matter what I do here. I'm gonna explain my team 2 that I chose. As usual, I chose Mika. I chose Ako to buff my Mika. And I chose Ui since I already used NY.Fuuka on my first team. I need another cost down to help manage Mika's high X cost. So I went with Ui. Now, other than that, Maki, there isn't really much to explain with Maki. She does a decent amount of damage. She has red armor. She applies a bit of def down. And she's an LMG, which is important, which I will explain the phase 2 mechanics. Now, Neru. Why did I choose Neru? Neru is someone you don't necessarily see being that all that important for raids. The reason I chose Neru is because in phase 2 specifically, there is a mechanic. It says that every 15 times Hovercraft is attacked, it increases its incoming damage taken by 10%. So what this basically means, every 15 hit count. So this is purely hit count. It does not matter how much damage it does. This is purely a hit count thing. So every 15 hits, you deal 10% more damage to it. Go back to the reason I chose Neru, because but if I use Neru's X skill, she does 60 hits, which is technically the most hit count we have on an X skill. So this is the only reason why I chose Neru, and this is a good reason to use Neru. If you don't have Neru, or if you just need another team in phase 2, you can use Neru for that. So that's the reason why I went with Neru. And now besides Neru, why did I go with O.Nodoka? So the reason why I bring O.Nodoka is because these turrets need healing. Basically, healing is fuel for these turrets. If I go back to the skill description where it says defense device that automatically shoots down incoming missiles. So as long as the defensive turret device is up, it will automatically shoot down these targets. And on top of that, it deals 100% damage to missiles. Now, on top of that, it says also deals 5,000 damage to self. What that means is play similarly like a fueling mechanic thing, where the more it shoots, the more of the fuel it consumes. What all this means is that phase 2 in Saint Torment Evolved, these turrets have a fueling mechanism, and the fuel for these is the healing. So that's the reason why I bring O.Nodoka. So now you think that, oh hey, I already have an Ako, and she can use basic heals to heal those turrets, right? That's not wrong conclusion. That is absolutely correct, and that is what a lot of people do. But why I did not go for that? Because my Akko at that time was only 4-star, and 4-star Akko does not have enough healing to keep those turrets alive. If you have a UE30 or even a UE40 Akko, then you're fine. You will at least need a UE30 Akko for you to be able to solo Akko heal the turrets. Now, I could have at the time, of course, gone for that. I could have chosen to go for UE30 Akko, and that would have let me bring literally anyone else besides Nodoka. Now, the next reason why I bring Nodoka here. So, if I look at the skill that is exclusive to phase 2, where it says deal 300 damage up to 4 enemies and deal 450% damage to up to 2 enemies. So the other reason why I bring Nodoka is because I already know Akko can't solo heal the turret. And even if I UE30 my Akko, she can solo heal the turret. But now I need to worry about the survivability of my whole team basically. Now, although they don't take damage while the missile phase is going on, they only take damage when Wakamo's Hovercraft is on the field. Even then, my UE is just 3-star and my Neru is just 4-star. So eventually, I will run out of heals by Akko being my only source, and they will eventually die. This again was the trial and error phase of me trying to figure out what team is good. That's basically the full explanation of each student in team 2. Now I'm going to continue my raid here, but honestly there isn't a lot for me to describe in phase 2. So you just have to make sure you have a healing source, which is applicable only to insane and above, and you get bonus damage if you bring a hit count student. Specifically, that hit count student can be of any color as long as the main DPS matches the color, which is yellow for this raid. If I chose to bring Mika, you can of course have Maki as your main damage dealer. That's also fine, and you can bring hit count, some highlight hit count students. Of course, Neru is the shining example here because he has the most amount of hit counts on her X skill. You can bring any student that has fast attacks as well. So you can bring LMG users. That's why Maki is also another mainstay here. Now, on top of that, if let's say if you don't have a hit count bot, what you could opt for as well, you can bring Ochinatsu. Now, why Ochinatsu? Specifically because she boosts attack speed. Now, Ochinatsu is not the only student that does that. So she increases attack speed, and her basic skill also increases attack speed. So if you don't have a dedicated hit count student, you can just bring in your regular team, and your Ochinatsu can buff. You can utilize attack speed instead of hit count to help you get bonus damage through hit count. So phase 2 is very flexible. You can choose to bring a lot of varying students, but the one thing you can't avoid on Insane and above is the healing source. You need something or someone to heal your turrets so they can help you take down the missiles. That's why a lot of people also mention that phase 2 is very body throwable, because there isn't any dedicated student made for phase 2, because phase 2 that doesn't have that strict mechanics where only a few students can fulfill that. Of course, some students excel at things like hit count. Like I mentioned, Meru is the best student for that mechanic, but you don't need Meru for a clear. There are a lot of examples, and you can also experiment it on your own. So I'm gonna, again, like I said, there isn't a lot to explain in phase 2, but if there is anything, I will explain it. Right. So I'm gonna open with Ui so I can have cost down Mika X skill. Now here, let me just go back here. So here you can see the missile that Wakamo sends out. Those first of all damaged Neru since she's technically the front of the team. Then it damaged Mika a bit as well. Now you can see this one. Yeah. This specific skill where it damaged all 4 of my students. Now this is again another reason why I chose to bring a dedicated healer, is because of this specific reason that my team would not have been able to survive on just an Akko heal from her basic skill. Now I placed my O.Nodoka so she can A cover the turret, and on top of that she can have, here she can't technically cover Ui, but of course I can resummon O.Nodoka for that. And here you can see also turrets are shooting down those missiles, because the only other way that these missiles can be targeted are using students' X skills, and that would be a waste. So I'm gonna, again, like usual, continue with all the damage, use Neru for the hit count, and use Mika and Maki as leg Maki. Even though she's not the main DPS, she still puts out a respectable amount of damage here. So I can see, unfortunately, with this team, even though I'm so close, I did not manage to fully clear the raid. But this is again just another thing that I figured out through trial and error. Now, if I could have Aqua as a solo here, and I could bring in, let's say, basically I could have brought a buffer in place of bringing O.Nodoka. But since I had to bring in O.Nodoka, I consistently had this 1 million worth of damage left to clean up. Fast forward this, I'm just gonna bring in a cleanup crew. Again, this is kind of just anything works. It's only 1 million worth of damage. Even red students can take care of it. I'll just skip through this. Now here, like I said, I only have 1 million left to clean up, so I don't have any reason to worry about healing the turrets. I will do damage enough. I will have enough damage to do before I get the fail condition where the resort gets attacked by enough missiles. So just summoning Ayane, summoning Utaha, and using Shiroko for the hit count, and basically that on repeat. And I clear that remaining 1 million damage that needs to be cleared. So that's the end of my walkthrough of how I cleared this. Alright, so now I'm gonna pull up a couple of points in my actual runs where I had to end up resetting my run, which is again only in phase 1. Phase 2 was just I had enough practice in mock battle to not have to reset for any reason at all. So if I just quickly forward to those places. Alright, so here you can see that after Wakamo ran away, I had this, and my Eimi, even though she was on front of the team, I placed down Peroro as soon as I could. But the mistake I made here is placing it down a bit too close to Wakamo and not close enough to the main target of Wakamo. But of course, me summoning a Peroro here does cancel out that Force X skill. But once she recovers from her groggy, this is also happened in phase 1. She pushes back your team a bit, which can shift your team positions around. So if I play this up again, now here you can see that she chose Peroro as the main target, which is fine. It's actually good that she did that. But if you notice after that, the closest student to Peroro Sama, it is according to the game. I didn't pull out a ruler and measure. But in the game, the closest student, Peroro, was Mika. And since Mika was the closest, and she already took so much damage because of the previous 2 minutes in this fight, she ends up taking the ricochet damage. Here you can see. Once Wakamo starts shooting, the ricochet damage goes to Mika, but that's not good. That's 1.5 minute worth of uptime that I could have had Mika for and do more damage to Wakamo. Seems it's right, so I could push into phase 2. And another thing that you'll notice that she does actively change her ricochet target. Now earlier when I was showing you my full clear, I did mention that she doesn't change her primary target, but she can actively change her ricochet target. That's one thing that might not matter, but if you see any clear and you're having a hard time figuring out why certainly one student is taking more damage than the other, this could be the case where the moving around of students means one of the student ends up being closer to the main target and ends up taking all the ricochets. So this was the one time that I had to reset. Now another reset point is on a different timestamp. Here, okay, you can see my main tank is still in front of the whole team basically, and once Wakamo uses her X skill, you can see that unlike my main clear, Eimi is in the center of the team. And like I mentioned, with the shotgun X skill that she has, as you can see that AoE is, even though Eimi is at the front, that AoE pierces whoever it hits. And as you'll see that once Wakamo shoots, Hifumi's dead. So this could be another reason why you fail your phase one, is if you're not positioned correctly enough, and if you end up taking this shotgun target on top of that, and if it ends up hitting anyone in your backline, that's bad, and you want to avoid that as well. So trial and error your phase one and see what positionings are better, what students you want to use depending on your investment levels. But do not ignore the CC mechanic. That's going to be a big mistake if you try to just oh, I can just Mika this phase one. No, you can't. You need to take the CC mechanic into account, and on top of that, you need to bring a dedicated tank. Phase 2, like I already did explain before, there isn't a lot mechanically going for it. If you're fighting it on Insane and above, you will need to bring some source of healing. Now, how much healing would you need? That you'll need to gauge on your own. If your team doesn't have a lot of investment in terms of their own survivability, you might have to bring in a dedicated healer. So the healing requirement for phase 2 you'll have to gauge on your own, but don't ignore that. And besides that, the hit count mechanic, it's a bonus, and it's a very accessible bonus. Like I said, Neru, who is a freely farmable student, you might not have Neru, which is fine. There's Meru, a gacha student, you might not have Meru, which is also fine. You can bring any student that shoots fast, that has an X skill that can apply a lot of hit counts, or you can just bring students that buff attack speed. So you can bring in a Maki, who's an LMG user, and there are other students like Pina is one student that is overlooked, but she is very good for phase 2. So other than that, honestly, kind of all I have here. Mechanically, it's not as complicated as Gauze, but this raid does test you on the team building aspect of this game, which is unfortunately something that people do tend to overlook, which is understandable. Team building is something that requires understanding the game to a fair degree. That's gonna be all I wanted to highlight. Now, even though this raid is simple and easy, like I said, and a lot of people say, this video is still gonna be this video still ended up being this long. Now, the reason for that is for phase one, especially with the team I use, which is Hifumi. That team is technically the comfiest way to go through phase one, but it also has a lot of cases where you can fail if you don't position stuff correctly or if you don't have enough investment. So even if you go for the comfy route, you still need to know how everything is. And it's hard to explain things like where to position your Peroro Sama, what does ricochet mean, and why you want to worry about it. Stuff like that is hard to explain without pointing at it. So with Blue Arga especially, it's hard to explain those intricacies by just like showing you a run without explanation. That's kind of my goal with these videos, is even though they are long, and as much as I would like to condense them down with like fancy editing and zoom out and highlighting stuff, I'm not really good at that kind of thing. But I do want to put out this simple, hopefully simple to understand and basic info about raids, and I will try and continue to do so if I have time. Yeah, that's that. Hopefully, again, this video helps you out. And if you have any feedback, any question, anything you might want to ask, you can leave a comment down below. Anyways, I'll see you next week. I might see if I have time and stream my own runs. I will try to aim for torment clear, but I might not be able to. I'll see. I'll definitely give it a try. Yeah, see you next week. Hopefully you have a easier time clearing Wakamo Hovercraft. Don't be fooled by people saying that this is an easy raid. Mechanically, yes, it is easy. compared to every other raid. But if you're a new player and if you don't know a lot about raid mechanics, and this might be your first ever raid, or if you've never faced Wakamo Hovercraft before, hopefully this video provides a bit of more non-obvious stuff about it, and hopefully that helps you experiment a bit with your own team and build with what you have. And I do appreciate if you did stick around. I appreciate you sticking around, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.